Hey everyone, welcome back to Contractor Evolution. Money for you and your family and the time to enjoy it. Most evolving contractors want both. The finer details of the picture may change from entrepreneur to entrepreneur. We're all unique, of course, but for a lot of us, our dream life and business is centered around more money and more time. And you can't really savor one without the other. Now, as you've definitely realized already, this dream is impossible without competent staff who can independently solve problems, make decisions, and drive the business forward. Developing leaders within is essential because if everyone and everything needs us, we'll never feel the freedom that motivated us to start our company in the first place. Do you want empowered teams and leaders that execute well without you, or a bunch of worker bees who constantly need babysitting? The choice is yours. This is why coaching will always be more effective than bossing. Now, to help us move from boss to coach, we're joined by James Dale, one of our favorite recurring guests. As you've heard in other episodes, James is Director of Training and Development for Breakthrough Academy. Today's conversation is about situational leadership and how to coach your employees as they go through the 3 developmental stages associated with taking on a new role or learning a new skill. If you can't develop talent, your business will always run you. This conversation is a little shorter and super actionable.
You're watching Contractor Evolution, where we unpack the systems, tactics, and skills you need to take your fast-growing contracting business to the next level.
You're here to learn what it takes to scale up, work less, and increase profitability. You've come to the right place.
Stay tuned to learn what separates the new breed of contractor from the old school, and welcome to your ultimate guide on the business of contracting.
Hey, just before we jump into things, I wanted to let you know you can get the free resources that we talk about in this episode in the show description. So hit pause right now, go download them, and they'll be waiting in your inbox by the time we finish this episode.
Hey, James, it's great to have you in studio.
Thank you very much.
Good to see you again, bro.
It's good to see you guys again.
I love it when you fly over and do these things with us. It's always a ton of fun, and we're glad you're here. I want to start with a little story. I'm going to paint a bit of a picture for us. I want your take on it. So listen really closely, okay?
Okay.
So actually, a little context for the listener before I dive in. I'm going to tell a story about a landscaping business, the story about Chris and Josh. But if you're in a different industry, like you're a renovator, you're a custom home builder, you run a roofing company, you run a painting company, you're a sub-trade, whatever, it doesn't really matter. Like the salient points of this story are going to relate to your industry just as well. So just kind of like listen from there. I'm talking about landscapers, but all of this is going to translate well to your business, I promise. The other thing that I would say is what we're talking about in today's episode is developing people. And that doesn't really matter whether you're growing them internally, right? You're moving someone up a position in your organizational chart, or you're hiring from outside your organization and bringing them in to fill a new position. So it doesn't matter. But here's a story about Chris and Josh. So Chris owns a landscaping business, and he has a design and construction side where they're building landscapes, and then he has like a maintenance side where they're mowing lawns and doing some softscape and pruning trees and like looking after yards. But he has this guy Josh on the construction side. He's a really, really competent crew member. He's been working for the business for the last number of years. He's hardworking. He's really reliable. He's upbeat. He's like all the good stuff that you look for. The other thing is that he's very technically proficient. So he knows how to run all the equipment on site. He understands how to set up irrigation systems. He knows how to take a landscape design and then build it properly in a very hands-on way. He's detail-oriented, which Chris really likes. He shows initiatives. And the other thing about Josh is that he has stuck around the business through ups and downs over the last few years. So he's committed, he's loyal. For all intents and purposes, Josh is a young leader inside Chris's business, or at least he's showing the early signs of that. Does that all make sense so far?
Yep.
Okay. Now, Chris's business is growing, and he's thinking of adding a fourth crew to his landscape construction division. And at the same time, Josh is starting to outgrow this crew member role. And so it makes a ton of sense to move Josh to become a foreman, hire 2 new laborers, and sort of build a crew around Josh. This would increase production capacity for the business, and it also gives Josh the leadership opportunity that he's looking for. So Chris does exactly that. He brings on some laborers, he reallocates some equipment in a vehicle, and Josh's crew, right, is born. Now here's where it gets interesting. 3 months later, during peak busy season, Josh comes to Chris. He says, "Hey man, I am thinking about leaving the company. I'm totally overwhelmed. I am not having a good time at work anymore." And so what Josh basically says is that he feels unsupported. He's in a constant state of stress. The demands of the foreman role are totally different than being a crew member. Totally different skill set. He is out of his element. Josh admits he was a good landscaper, but managing a project from start to finish, making sure that materials arrive on time and in the right quantity, keeping his crew motivated day in and day out, dealing with the constant scrutiny of homeowners, maneuvering around big weather events and delays, and just constantly needing to be on, needing to be the one calling the shots, making decisions on sites. It has all this foreman level stuff has him completely flustered, and he's wanting to quit. So that's the story. And James, the question for you is this: like, Chris, the owner, is in a tough spot. Josh, the foreman, for now is in an even tougher spot. Do you see this happen in the industries that we coach? And what do you think is going on here? What's the solution?
Totally. So this story is actually, I've heard this a number of times actually. And I don't think I know this is a landscape example, but I've seen this. It doesn't matter if it's painting, construction, roofing, whatever it is. And I think it's super common. And this example, it seems like it's a bit of a field role where the person has been promoted to a new role. And I've seen it where that happens, like you said, or someone comes externally and gets put into a position. Maybe they're not maybe ready for it first, or it's new to them. Yeah. And so this is I think it's a very common thing actually.
Totally. We see it in all departments too, right? Like we see it in sales, where you have someone that really excels as a salesperson, just closing deals, and then you move them into like a sales leadership role, right? And now they're in a very different environment. You see it in office and production management. It's also it happens in all aspects of the organization too.
Totally.
But from a leadership coaching development standpoint, what's gone on in this example? Where has maybe Chris failed to understand something or failed to support?
Well, so I think that maybe Chris in this example it's common, but I think understanding someone's development level. So this is a new position that Josh is in, but then you need to have the right leadership style for where someone is at that development level. So again, in this example, he was really good technically, in his role before, but now he's got all these new responsibilities that are brand new to him. And so he's being put in a tough spot.
James, you're talking about like the difference. So you're talking about the difference between Josh's ability to set up an irrigation system versus schedule his crew.
Yeah, again, I think it's pretty common where you someone who gets promoted who is really good at like maybe the trade or the technical skill, and now all of a sudden they're saying, hey, on top of that now is lead the crews, set customer expectations, the scheduling. And so all those are new. And so the development level that Josh is at there is very new. And so you need to lead that transition appropriately.
Yeah. Even though that person is the same person and they're a smart guy, like Josh is a smart guy.
He's a stud.
Yeah.
He's a stud. Yeah. I think that's actually the risk. This guy is a total beast at this role. Therefore, you assume, hey, you know what? I'm going to make him a foreman now. Or in a sales example, I'm going to make the salesperson a sales manager now. And they flounder because, like we say all the time, what got them here won't get them there. Totally. That's basically what's happened.
Totally, yeah. Exactly.
Just in broad strokes, like what is the solution?
So the solution is you need to understand where that person is developmentally in that new role. And then you need to apply the right leadership style to help that person through as they develop in the new role.
And we're going to break this down. There's 3 developmental levels that an employee or a staff member is going to go through as they start a new role, take on a new task, whatever. We're going to break down each one, how your leadership style needs to change through each. But just from your guys' like perspective and experience in business, what do you stand to gain or lose if you don't solve this? If you're just kind of cavalier about it and go, you know what, I'm just gonna like throw people into the mix and the cream will rise to the crop and people will figure it out. Like, what's wrong with maybe adopting that approach when it comes to developing your people?
Well, I think the first one, in this example, you can see that I think that you could lose Josh in this example. So one is, there's going to be a retention issue. Like if someone is not feeling success, or they're frustrated, or they have low confidence, they either could quit or move on, or you're going to lose that person. And I think another huge thing of why this is important is, if you are able to develop people, it allows you to scale the business if you choose to, and thus your quality of life is vastly improved if you've got people who are dialed into the roles, are able to do the roles really well. Because if you don't work on this, it's going to come back to you ultimately.
On the lifestyle thing, this was especially true is if you can get to a point where you can get people to take on responsibility, like to take on more responsibility, that's really, I think, the key to lifestyle, and where you see so many entrepreneurs get stuck in that like rat race and that carousel of just like, we're dealing with the same problems year after year after year. And where we've seen some that show this pattern like 6-7 years in a row, it's because they haven't been able to successfully get people to take on more and more responsibilities, so that it's not all on their shoulders. I think is huge. And another foundational, I think, realization to this is that in this kind of industry that's super labor driven, your job as a leader is really to optimize the performance of human labor. Right. Really. Like, that's when you really boil down like the definition of a leader in this kind of industry. The tactical strategizing maybe isn't as important as it is in some other industries, because it's such a game of optimizing human labor and getting people to really succeed.
You're selling people's well-organized time for money, in essence, right?
It's a great definition.
And I think a lot of our listeners probably have this dream of running a business one day where they can do it, a lot of it from the computer. They can take off and go on a fishing trip on a Thursday if that comes up. They can take vacations. They're not attached like to their business like every single day. Yeah, by the hip, essentially. It's like they're Siamese twin where it's just always there. They're stuck to it. Most of our listeners would have this vision in their mind where it's like, I want to feel insulated from my business. I want to feel a layer of distance between me and the day-to-day operations of it. Yes, fires are up. Yes, things happen, but there's people, there's systems who can deal with that besides me. And so I just would say, before we dive into these 3 developmental levels, like, this is fundamental to achieving that dream. You will never, ever, ever have that unless you become a really good coach, a really good developer of people.
Totally.
Do you guys agree?
100%.
Okay, so let's dive into these 3 levels. What is development level 1?
So development level 1 would be when the person, the employee, has low competence in that role, but high commitment.
Low competence, high commitment. What do we mean by that?
So what I mean by low competence is, like, in this example, he's in a new role, a foreman role or a crew leader role. His ability or his skill or his knowledge to run the job sites, manage the customer expectations would be low.
Yeah, he's not very good at it.
He's not very good because it's his first time doing it.
But the key thing that I think is the highlight here is it's for that skill. It's for the new skill, the one that they're moving into. So whether they're promoted internally or whether they come from the outside, it's what you're moving them into. So even he might have been super competent on running certain pieces of machinery or installing irrigation systems or whatever. It doesn't mean that this person is competent in like job site planning for multiple people.
Yeah,
totally. Yeah, like there's so many things now that we're asking this person to do, right? Like job site planning, managing customer expectations, managing maybe inventory or materials, ordering materials. So their competence is low in those things because it is the first time doing it.
Yeah. So you're not judging, like you're not looking at saying, and Josh is a competent employee or an incompetent employee. You're looking at the skill set that you're trying to move them into and saying, and I think even as you're listening to this right now, think of some of the people that you're struggling with and ask like, what is their actual, objectively speaking, what is their level of competence in the things you have them doing?
I've always said the only way to get good at something is to suck at it for a while.
Yeah.
Like it fundamentally, it doesn't matter if you're learning guitar or managing crews or trying to speak Spanish. Like you're going to be bad at it for a while. But one thing that you said a second ago that I want you to explain in more detail is like commitment is high. While he's, I don't want to be mean to Josh. He's kind of a shitty foreman still. He could get better, but right now he sort of sucks. His commitment's high. He's super motivated. Why is that? Like, why is he excited about this?
Well, especially at the beginning, you've been given a new role. Like it could be like, hey, I have a new title. I'm driving the truck now. Maybe I've got a new increase in wages.
Yeah.
And
or
also
new
you
to
want
the company.
or you're new to the company, or you want to prove yourself, right, in this new role. So your motivation and your commitment and your at first is going to be high.
Right. And as a leader, it's important to, take advantage is the wrong word, but like lean into that. Like you have this person, you have some clout with this person, you have some trust, you have their excitement. Take advantage of that while you can.
And they're like, big-eyed and bushy-tailed. They're like, Jim's like, I want to impress you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And again, to your point, like, it's not you're taking advantage of, but like that's a huge opportunity for you.
So, what is the not super competent but highly motivated? What's the leadership style, or how do we coach this person? How do we show up for this person?
So, if someone's at that development level, what you'd want to do is use a very directive leadership style.
Meaning?
So, a directive leadership style means where you are giving them very clear, I guess, essentially directions of how to do things. So, it could be like, this is the order to do things. High direction, so they know how to perform those new tasks. So it could be checklists. It could be step 1 is this, step 2 is this, step 3 is this. So it's just making it super clear for the person so that they know how to do it.
There's like explicit instructions for everything.
Explicit instructions, and it could be where, again, don't forget their competence is low, their motivation or their to do it is high, so they'll be very open to that at that point, and they want to do a good job.
Why is it so important because what you're saying is like you're not giving them a ton of lateral space. They don't have a ton of like creative room to come up with their own stuff. It's pretty top down. Do this, not that.
Do exactly
follow
this,
these steps.
Follow these steps.
Yeah, like it's pretty rigid, but. And you're saying that's a good thing at this early stage. Why is it such a good thing when they first start?
Well, and this is my experience too. I find that people actually yearn for that at first. Like they want to know, like, how do I do this? And again, we're assuming again, and the correct assumption is this person doesn't know how to maybe manage inventory or plan a job out on a crew level. So for them, they're excited to like, what do I need to do? And so for you to give them those steps and follow this process is extremely important.
So like if we're just doing a little bit of forensics here on this example with Chris and Josh, given what you just said and Josh being upset 3 months in, likely what's happened, tell me if you see this a lot. Chris goes, hey, you're foreman now. I'm going to give you this. We're going to take one old truck from this crew. You can have it. Here's a small cat, here's a skid steer, here's a small cat, like here's some equipment, here's some shovels, here's some wheelbarrows, here's like 3 jobs for the next couple months. Go nuts. Call me if you have any problems. Like he totally like sort of overloaded him, dumped a whole bunch of stuff, and then disappeared. He wasn't there to give the explicit.
And didn't give the tools necessary to do it.
He wasn't there being like, hey Josh, this is how you do a job site as like assessment at the beginning of a project to analyze risks. This is how you hold a crew meeting. This is how you do an initial customer walk around. This is like, he wasn't there for that stuff. He was just sort of left to figure it out on his own.
What I see is this behavior. The best word for it, I think, is it's super assumptive. Like you make these assumptions that like, he's a smart guy. He's been able to, figure a bunch of stuff out. He'll figure this out. Like it's just, you're very quick to jump to these like assumptions where you've not sat down and thought through, okay, but how do I know that he is competent at, giving customers daily updates?
And it's a great point. Like to what you just said there, I could, like, there's three of us right now. If I said to both of you, hey, do a good job with the customer or run a good meeting, each of you might do that completely different,
right?
Or you're like what you think is a good for that. So you could give really clear directions of how to do that, right?
Any like big like pitfalls or mistakes or things that people need to be aware of when they're working with a new staff member in developmental phase 1?
I think the one thing I would say is this: is if you can think of like this role specifically, is you probably want to break the role down a little bit, because you're asking them to do multiple things, so you probably want to give them direction, quite clear direction in the different aspects of the role. So here's how you run a toolbox meeting, and give them like an agenda and like steps. Right. And then same thing, here's how you do customer expectations. So it's not like, you want to probably be quite directive in the different elements they're now new at.
But it's super specific what you're saying. You're not like, hey, like I really need you to get better at being a foreman. You're saying, hey, I've noticed you're like awesome at keeping your guys motivated. You're super upbeat. You communicate. You give them, pats on the back when they need it, but you also give them a kick in the ass when they need it. The one thing you are really struggling with are like these quality control inspections, like at different stages of the project, and especially at the end, you're missing details. When we do these really, really important inspections, and what that looks like is like, the customer comes and finds it, and we look unprofessional. And the point you're saying is like, you don't give them like holistic feedback on the entire position. You're giving them super, super specified feedback on elements of the position.
And the interesting thing is, fortunately and unfortunately, that does take time. You got to sit and you got to think about it, right? And if you're just running around like super busy, it's hard to do that. So this is one of these things where you got to be able to almost like sit down with a piece of paper and a coffee and break down different aspects of the role and think at like, where are they at here? Where are they at there from a competence perspective? A really good analogy to this one, Benji, I know we sometimes talk about this industry just because it's so clear as an analogy, is with pilots and flight.
Right.
And that industry is really well controlled for obvious reasons. But if you think about like, if you're evaluating a pilot, their technical abilities, let's say to do like pre-flight checks on like the mechanical systems after starting an airplane, are totally unrelated to their, let's say, ability to communicate with air traffic control, right? Like as they're cruising around taxiways and stuff. There's like totally different skill sets. So you're saying this guy's like, well, he's a competent pilot, but there's so many different aspects to that role. You have to look at them individually. Business
is multifaceted, and you need to look at it as such. Blanket statement feedback is pretty difficult to implement, generally speaking.
Yeah, 100%. I'll give you a really blunt one in contracting. Or you say someone's an amazing sales guy, he's so good with customers, he can make deals happen, but like the administrative side, the CRM's a mess. There's no tracking anywhere. Like you have no idea what's going on. Like, are they successful? No, they're going to cause a mess. Right. So it is very multifaceted.
It's good. Okay. So development level 1, low competence, high commitment, give them a super, super directive style of leadership. James, what's development level 2?
So development level 2 is where now the person has some competence and some commitment. So they've maybe been in the role for a while now, and they've got some experience, they've improved some of their skills, they've had some wins, they've had some losses. And also they've probably, their motivation is probably maybe fluctuating, because they've, to what we just said before, there's been some things they're doing quite well at, some things they're not doing as well at.
Could it have gone down?
It could have gone down. Yeah, the commitment would probably have gone down, because if you can think about commonly, right? Because, and I think it's a good point, because when you first start something, you're super excited to do it. And then you get in the role a little bit, and you could maybe your commitment could start to regress a little bit.
Yeah. You're not as bright-eyed and bushy-tailed anymore.
Learning Spanish thing's actually more difficult than I thought.
Yeah. Totally. That's more. Because you maybe get kicked to the face a couple times and got your butt kicked a little bit, and now you're like, my motivation is not as high at first, right?
The shine has worn off of that new like foreman badge, and your face is dirty. And you're like, okay, this is pretty hard.
This is hard.
Kind of sucks actually. Yeah, I thought it was going to be easier.
Yeah.
Okay, but okay, maybe a little less motivated. They are more skilled. They've learned some stuff. They're not all the way there, but they've learned some stuff. What do they need as a leadership style or a coaching style?
So at this stage, you want to be more, instead of being super directive, it's probably more of like a coaching, supportive leadership style. at this stage.
What does that mean? Like what like we say the word coaching support. We say that a lot. Like, can you just speak in concrete language? What does that actually look like in development phase 2? What are you doing as a leader?
So at this stage, you wouldn't be like giving them clear directional time because they probably got to the basics now, but it's more like, I guess the examples are like, how do you think we should do this? What do you think we should do here? How'd that go last time? Any learning here? How can we be better next time? So it's more almost like partnering and asking good questions to get them and kind of working together to kind of find the solutions now.
And a lot of questions.
A lot of questions more. So it's much more directive. It's not as directive as before, but now it's more like, because they've got some experience like, hey, what do you think we should do here? What do you think we should do here? And then maybe you would add to what they're doing or what they've said, because you still have maybe some advice you can give them, but you're definitely involving them more now in the process.
It's a good word, working together.
Yeah, exactly.
How do you think we should go about this?
Yeah, exactly.
So you're not totally like, you're not telling them, so they're not out of the picture, but you're not out of the picture either. You're not just like, go do it. You're like, how do you think we should do this? And then say some stuff, but you can also say some stuff.
Totally. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of the time it would be, I've heard it described like this, where you know, your learner, in this case, Josh, comes to you and says, hey, like, how do we do blank? How do we, hey, you know what? The customer is like actually wanting to make a change to the plan, right? Like, how do we do this? And you as the coach, you just say, well, I don't know. How would you do it?
That's a great way to do it. It's like, what do you think we should do?
What do you think we should do? And then let them riff on that. Let them think creatively. They may come up with a great solution. They may totally not. But the point is, instead of giving them the answer like you would have in the last phase, you're getting their brain to start thinking about what they could do. And it stimulates growth. It stimulates a new part of the brain, and they start to come up with conclusions, come up with answers themselves.
I guess a greater way to capture this is like, ultimately, as a leader, you want your people to be more resourceful.
Yeah.
So you want them, by asking those questions and getting them to kind of like think through and have their suggestions, they're able to come up. And sometimes, you know, they're actually in the field and seeing the project. They actually might have better solutions than you.
Yeah.
And you don't want to be the bottleneck.
Yeah. So in the example we're going through, like Josh maybe like has a huge, there's like 2 days of rain on site, and they're at a stage in the project where they really can't work in wet weather. Josh comes to Chris and goes, hey, like, we have got 2 days here off the schedule. What do we do here? Chris would go, you know what, Josh, tell me what you think. And Josh goes, well, I think I'll ask the guys to maybe come in on Saturday and Sunday when it's supposed to be dry. It's going to suck. They have to work the weekend, but we talked about that earlier in the year. It should be okay. And then we're going to have to work a little bit of overtime next week. I'll make sure that I'll like communicate and set expectations with the customer to make sure that they know the project is going to be done maybe 2 or 3 days later than we thought because of this weather event. And then Chris goes, yeah, okay, like, sounds good enough. Go try that.
Sounds good.
Or he's like, those are all awesome thoughts. You should do all those. Let me give you 2 more important things that you didn't think about that are pretty crucial in this too.
Okay.
Write those down as well.
So I think like I'm seeing it clearly now, like less motivated, but a little bit more skilled. What this person needs is a bit more room to solve problems themselves, but not too much yet. And the best way to do that is just ask them a ton of questions. Do you see any pitfalls or mistakes made by leaders in this stage, James?
I think this is a stage that a lot of people can basically skip. They could be like super directive, or just be like, hey, go do this. And without any kind of follow-up or any kind of checking or any of that partnering. So I think people could skip the stage too quickly, which is a really critical part of someone's development.
Right. So, okay. So you're basically saying like a business owner will have someone new, and they'll just say at the beginning, okay, so like when you're scheduling your crews and your project and you're organizing who's doing what in day 1, day 2, you do it like this, like this, like this, like this. Okay. You got it. Okay. Makes sense. I'm out of here.
Yeah.
And then you're just gone.
And then you just skip all that coaching supportive stage as they're getting better and better at the role.
Yeah. So you told them once, you overloaded them, and then you just left them to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay.
A good analogy, Benji, on this, I just want to throw this in real quick. Prior to recording here, we were talking about Benji, about James's 2 little boys. It's just, what you're, I guess, kind of saying is like, you're teaching a kid to ride a bike. The first stage, you are calling the shots for them so they don't fail. So it's like they've got training wheels on, they can't fall over. because you're there, right? Like you're calling the shots. Second stage, you take the training wheels off. So you want them to start riding on their own, but you're there if they start to fall over to catch them.
It's an awesome analogy. And actually, exactly, you're there as a guide. Almost as a guide, as they're still progressing and learning that new skill.
Yeah, so they're there. Hopefully he's riding upright on his own. But if he goes to fall, like he misses some crucial steps in his process, you're there to kind of catch him and put him back straight up.
Totally.
Cool. Okay, so that's level 2. Moving into development level 3, what does this one look like?
So this is development level 3 is when someone's highly competent and they're highly committed to the role. So they're, at this point, they've been in the role for a while. Their ability, their skill has increased over time. They've probably had a lot of wins. They start to figure the role out because of that work you've done prior, and now their competence and their commitment is high.
They're skilled and they're motivated.
Yeah.
They're actually, like, you could say they're feeling themselves a little bit. They've got some swagger. Yeah. They're like, man, I went through a lot, but I figured some stuff out. In the Josh example, Josh is going like, no, like I'm a good foreman. Yeah. Like, I think I got
this. It's like, I get it and I feel good about it.
Totally. I get it. I want it. And I'm assuming, going back, like the training wheels are now fully off. Like what's your coaching style when someone's in level 3?
So at this stage, the right leadership style will be more delegative. And that's where you're basically letting them make the calls and they're the ones responsible. And now you're kind of step back. And now that's the point where you can delegate.
Yeah, you can give them like complex tasks. You can like give them 3 projects in a row and say like, communicate with the schedule, communicate with the customers, manage the schedule, make sure materials come in, make sure your crews show up. Like they have the capacity to take that on now, whereas before they didn't.
And it's like you've turned over the responsibility completely to them now. And it's almost like the conversation will be like, here's the project, let me know when you're done.
Which is, funny enough, in the example, Benji, to what you're talking about with Chris, the business owner, and Josh, the employee that's moved into a new role, what we commonly see is that Chris just goes straight to this.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Because Josh is a smart guy. He'll figure it out.
Yeah, totally.
And he might, like in some instances, if Josh is really committed and has no other options, he might just grind it out, and you might get lucky, but that is so far from a best practice. We're not advocating it at all. Like if you do that and you just skip level 1, you skip level 2 and say, here's your little foreman badge and figure the rest of it out, you are going to lose your people.
Such a good point, man, what you're saying there, because you're right. Some people could figure out the role, but you're maximizing your chances by kind of being more intentional and like helping the person develop over time.
Yeah, like you hire or you promote 50 people over whatever span of time, 5 might be in that camp that will. Yeah. And on the other 45, it's going to flop. And do you build a business that way? Not really. So this becomes like a core part of the way that a successful entrepreneur develops people.
When people are fully into development level 3, what are some of the mistakes that leaders make when their learners are here?
I think one that could be quite common is that if someone is at this development level 3 stage, the leader is still micromanaging them or being very highly directive with them still.
Right. That would piss them off.
It would piss them off.
As a leader, you're still in development level 1.
Like you're treating them as like you're being directive with them. Like, do this. Step 1 is this. Step 2 is that. And they're like, dude, I got this.
Bro, yeah.
Like you've totally misdiagnosed where they're at.
Yes. Yeah. And you could lose people that way as well.
Oh, totally. If you're a super competent person and you feel like you have someone breathing down your neck, it's like, that's not good. Yeah. I think it's important to let people rock when they're truly ready. Okay. I love it. So just to recap, like level 1, low competence, high commitment. You're really motivated, but you're not very good, simply put. Development level 2 is some competence, some commitment. You've skilled up a bit, but you've been kicked in the face a few times. Your motivation is maybe less. Development level 3, this person is feeling themselves. They're confident in their role. They're enjoying their new position. You're off to the races. Now, I want to close on this question, James. Some listeners are probably hearing this and they go, yeah, that'd be like awesome, but I'm really freaking busy. You have no idea what I have on my plate. Like I would spend time with these people if I could, but like there's just too much going on right now. They're going to have to figure it out. What would you say to that?
That's a great question. I think a lot of people would be thinking that. And I would say you gotta pick your battles. Like you could do the upfront work and kind of think through this and help your team through some of these stages. And you could do that and invest in them and then have higher retention, higher productivity, able to scale your quality of life. You could choose not to do that. And you may be losing people quicker, have that revolving door go through. And I would say, and this is, as a leader or as a business owner, your ability to lead and develop others is probably one of the biggest things you can do to work on, and one of the highest leverage things you can do. ROI.
Another way to put that, I think, is sometimes the best way to go fast is to go slow. Right. One of the things that's really front of mind for me in these kind of issues, and there are others that are similar, kind of a similar paradigm in business, where you're just like, man, I just don't have time for all this. What always gives me a lot of peace on this is just understanding and respecting that there's a natural law of how long stuff takes, right? It's like, even when you're smart, even if you hire smart people, it still takes time for people to learn stuff. It just does. And another law very related to this is that there's a certain amount of time in a day, in a week. Everyone is governed. You and I are governed by the same amount of time we're given in a day, in a week, in a month, whatever. So have comfort in that. Like, if it takes this amount of time, that's how much time it takes. And you can only go that fast. So don't try to go 3 times faster. Right. And I think for some reason there's this, there's a whole other conversation, but there's this like rush, like we need to get here. I need to get to like 40 people, or I need to be at 50 staff, and I need to produce this much. Cause no, you don't. Like, where are you going?
Yeah.
And it's like, would you rather have 40 untrained, kind of semi kind of skilled people, or like 25 dialed in people?
Totally. And you will get to the 40, but it might take you 5 years, and that's okay. You've got a long career. Like, where are you rushing to?
Totally. Nothing's an emergency.
No, do we look like ER surgeons?
Totally. As our guest Ryan Stewart says, nothing is an emergency. Just seems like it is.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. I think that's as good a place as any to close it. James, thanks for doing this, man.
Thank you so much, guys. Thanks a lot.
Awesome. Good times.
Thanks so much for watching this episode of Contractor Evolution. If you've already subscribed to our channel, consider sharing this episode with another contractor who you think needs to hear it.